Okay, welcome mothers and others. Tonight is our last webinar of the primary season, and early voting starts next week. And I'm really excited about early voting. I always try to go the first day. And before we get going on introducing you all to these great candidates that we have for you tonight, it is really important that remember we have skin in the game, that we help the candidates that we believe in. It'd be really wonderful if you all called up your candidate and asked them if you could show up at a polling location next week and help hand out literature or push cards as people are going in to vote. It's super important. A lot of times, people don't have enough volunteers to do this in their districts. The districts are huge and they're spread out all over Texas. So I really am begging all of you to really get involved right now and call up your candidates tomorrow and ask them if you can help them next week during early voting to send out some push cards and help them at the polls, even putting up signs or taking them down. Just whatever you can do to help. I think candidates would really appreciate it. So let's get on with the show. Today is Thursday, February the 15th, and we have some really wonderful candidates with us tonight. So I'm so excited because our first couple of candidates are actually they're winners. They got A's on our mom's report card this last session. And trust me, it was not easy getting an A, especially because we did not give everybody the criteria. We sort of decided to do the mother's report card at the last minute after we saw that there were several Democratic legislators that were not voting the way they should have been voting on some bills. And at that point, we were like, we need to call them out. And the only way we can call them out is to set up the criteria for how we can, support not only legislators, but also show that the legislators support families. And so that was why we decided to do the mother's report card, and we had a really great ledge team. So I can't wait to introduce you to these first two candidates because they both got A's. So up first is Nathan Johnson. Nathan Johnson represents Texas in Texas Senate District 16. And if, like I just mentioned, he got an A on the mom's report card during the 88th ledge. He's also really well known for so many things that he's doing. I think he has a passion for the environment and energy, and we're going to hear all about it. So Nathan, welcome to our webinar this evening. Can you tell us a little bit about you and why you're running for office?
Yes, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Mothers Against Greg Abbott and Mothers and Others. Thank you for the A on the report card, and I have to, in all fairness, report that I got an F on a report card yesterday from the NRA, and I also got an F from Texas Right to Life because of all the bills I filed to try to restore a woman's right to choose, to control her own destiny, really, abortion rights in Texas. I have been in office since I won in 2018. I was the first Democrat to represent this area of Dallas in over 30 years. In 2019 was my first session. I've had 3 sessions, and in those 3 sessions, I've passed about 100 bills. It might be 101 or 99, but around 100 bills. Some of the more significant ones from this last session, Nancy, you mentioned energy, you mentioned the grid and the environment. I mean, if we're going to have a stable grid for 30 million people in a $2 trillion economy and people aren't going to freeze to death when there's a storm, we're going to need a stable grid. We're going to need one that can generate energy and keep the air clean. We're going to need one that we can afford. I spent a ton of time on the grid. I'm in those rooms. I'm in those conversations. And I got $2 billion for a backup power system that I'm chairing the committee for the deployment of, that is going to make sure that nursing homes and fire stations and water towers have energy when we need it. I got news 2 weeks ago that a bill that I passed in my second session got 350,000 uninsured Texans health insurance for the first time ever. What this comes down to really, Nancy, is our job in office is to do 3 things. We are there to fight, we are there to win, and we are there to build. I've been fighting for Medicaid expansion for 6 years. I've been the state's lead voice on this, and I still haven't won. Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott are still blocking it. But I looked for another way. How else can we get this done? And I found a way without even throwing a punch to get 350,000 people health insurance. That's through legislative skill, determination, doing your homework, exploiting and taking advantage and using your relationships with your colleagues to get stuff done. That's the winning part. And the building part, Nancy, that's what we all have to do. The point here, particularly as Democrats, is over the last 40 years, we've seen the middle class pressed down. We've seen the ability of people to rise up held back. It is time to start changing policies in the state, to make investments in our physical infrastructure like the grid and roads, but in our social infrastructure like education and healthcare and cultural institutions and an effective government itself, so that we can bring people up again. And as Democrats, when we do that, when we don't cede all of this stuff to the Republicans, we become the party not just of compassion, we are the party of competent compassion and the party that allows all people to rise up. I think it's an exciting moment to be a Democrat, Nancy. I think we're heading towards something very, very soon. The progress that we've made, I don't even think we can see it, but it's there. And I want to be back in office right now so that I can be part of it.
Wonderful. So Nathan, what are the top 3 most important issues for your district?
Well, Dallas County, in my district, sprawls around Dallas County, about 1 million people of this slightly more than 2 billion people county, has the worst uninsured rate in the state. So despite the good work that we've been able to do on health insurance, there's a lot left. If we expand Medicaid, finally, we do pick up another 1.5 million people, many of them in my district. The same way that we got 350,000 people health insurance recently with a different mechanism, I think there's more ways we can reach people. Got to have health insurance coverage for people. We've got to have available healthcare. We've got to have health information out there. We've got to have changes in how we fund healthcare so that we have social determinants of health so that people stay healthy. Healthcare is a top issue. If you're not healthy, you aren't in school, you aren't at work, you can't make a living, you have family bankruptcies. All of this stuff is absolutely essential. Education, of course, is essential. That is our ticket out. That's our ticket out up. And it's probably the single biggest failure of the legislature last session. Despite some good work in the interim, and this was bipartisan, as the 2019 education reform package was bipartisan, a lot of good work was done. We were ready to go with some good educational measures, and the whole thing was tanked by vouchers. And I said so on the Senate floor, and I got in big trouble with the lieutenant governor and others for calling them out for saying you have just weighted down the entire education bill with a divisive issue, a cooperative issue where we have a shared vision, and you've brought it down one with deep division. That needs to be fixed. Finally, kind of as a third issue, but it's not one issue, I think whether it's my district in particular is affected, but the whole state is affected. The right-wing agenda. And it's not a cop-out to try to get too many things. I think they're all of a piece. I think the attacks on LGBTQ rights, I think the attacks on abortion rights, I think putting In God We Trust in the public schools, I think this whole, even we had a bill to ban or to blacklist financial service companies who make investments in the environment. I mean, this is all part of one big right-wing agenda, and it's being pursued rather quietly. And one thing I think that's important is for all of us as Democrats to be aware of the little subtle steps they're taking, because they're creating little pieces and they pull them all together, and then we're in fascism. And I worry about that. And you said, we were talking earlier about a place that we want our kids, where our kids can live. My kids are going to be okay. I want them to be proud to live in this state. Right now, they might live in the state just to help make it a better place. Maybe they can be part of the struggle with all of us. I want them to be proud of it. And if we don't pursue those 3 issues, education, healthcare, and defeating a right-wing agenda, we're not going to get there. Of course, there's a billion other things like cybersecurity and grid and roads and broadband. And I'd love to talk about all of those. The greatest privilege of being in office is that you care about what you're working on when you go to bed. You care about it when you wake up. And it's like taking 47 credit hours in a college course all the time. It's all interesting. It's all important. And we as Democrats should be involved in it all, passing bills, killing bills, changing bills. And I can't wait to get back in there and continue doing all of that.
So when I had conversations with Roland Gutierrez or my senator, which is Sarah Eckhardt, they always mentioned that there was a team of 4 of you guys that just really worked really hard and always together. And it was you and Sarah, Roland, and Jose Menendez. So, I mean, how do you feel about the teamwork that you all did this last session?
I'm so proud of that we were able to hang together. You know, you'll never find 2 senators or 2 representatives agreeing on everything all the time. But the 4 of us recognize the importance of, I think, taking a stand at moments when it's not convenient. when it's not politically convenient, at moments where you might have to explain your vote to some donors or to in a primary or to the lieutenant governor, right? And your bill agenda might be jeopardized. I mean, I take my bill agenda very seriously. I pass a lot of bills. I don't want them not to pass. There are people whose infants' hearing depend on me passing a bill, but you can't be afraid to do that in a moment when there's a menacing person at the microphone. That in Senate language means means no. And there are times when it's been 29-2, me and Sarah Eckert, 29-4, me and Roland Gutierrez and Sarah Eckert and Jose Menendez. They're all very serious legislators. We all have very different styles. But I think one of the reasons it's such a good team is we allow each other to have different styles, and we come back into the room and say, okay, what do we need to do? What is it about your political personality that will advance this in a way that mine cannot, and about mine that yours cannot? And we think about it and we talk about it and we talk about what we're going to say. Or sometimes it's live in real time. I'll get up there and say something completely inflammatory and get myself in trouble. And Sarah will pick up the mic and say something worse and take the heat off of me. And that's just kind of a funny way of looking at it. But it's enjoyable and it's gratifying to work with people. And honestly, outside of the four of us, there's a lot of people with a lot of character all the time. But yes, it was the four of us who I think were the most aggressive at advocating for things particularly where the right wing things have gone too far. And they're scary topics and it takes courage. And having some colleagues there standing with you makes it easier to face those sometimes terrifying challenges.
Absolutely. So I always call you guys the pack of four. So speaking of a pack, there is a pack in DC, and they put out a bill just got announced that is on connecting our grid to the national grid and to the national system. And it was put out with, Greg Casar and AOC put this out. So, you did so much work on the grid. Can we talk a little bit about what that bill could mean to Texas? Because honestly, I know that the Republicans are complaining, but it was horrible living without electricity for over a week. It was absolutely so scary. I thought I lived in a third world country. We did not have electricity. We couldn't drive out of our driveway because we live on a hill and it was full of snow. We were trapped. It was just the worst feeling in the whole world. And we didn't have heat and we didn't have water. So it was pretty traumatic. And I don't know how many of us can ever get over that. I mean, it was awful.
It's trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you feel about this new bill?
I think that integration into the national grid is a longer term goal than a single bill. I haven't read it. It's just out. It's going to require subjecting ERCOT probably, or maybe not, to FERC regulation. And for a long time, people said, oh, why not just be regulated by FERC? It's interesting. Many of the most ardent environmental, passionate activists like that we are an island, because we now have the #1 wind power and the #1 solar power, both in the country, partly because we can work very quickly. Meanwhile, we are kind of islanded and we're in trouble if something goes down. And it makes us vulnerable when we're not interconnected. I'm saying there's conflicting forces. Let me just say it this way. I think it's a noble and important goal that we can have. It's not an overnight thing. It's going to require cooperation with the federal government and the state government. It's going to require build out of billions of dollars in infrastructure, probably the merger of technologies that don't quite exist yet. But in the meantime, if we're going to do that, I want to make sure that Texas can continue doing the environmental development that we've been able to do. I'm part of a number of groups with leading scientists that are looking at ways to capture carbon, to use the heat of the earth to create a battery, all sorts of things that will clean up the environment. And we can do those quickly because we're kind of off in our own little playground. On the other hand, it does leave us vulnerable. The interconnection is good for security purposes. And without the interconnection, we become a target for cyber attacks and hostile foreign nations. Yes, I'm serious, because they can take out Texas, and Texas has a whole lot of stuff that have to do with national defense and security, and we're all by ourselves here. We're sitting ducks. So the ambitions behind the project, I think, are good. I don't know how realistic it is, either politically or technologically, to suddenly merge us with the grid. My goal is to continue having the kind of leading industry flexibility that we have in Texas, but at the same time, not be standalone and not thumb our noses to the federal government and pretend that we're a separate state, because we're not. So I think maybe just as a conversation starter, it's a very important bill. And as for practical reality, I think it's going to take some time, and we have to be careful because there's still a lot of good things we can do within the ERCOT environment.
Absolutely. And speaking of good things we can do, so Greg Abbott just got $6 million worth of like a donation from this multi-billionaire from Pennsylvania. And it's really going to make a huge impact on not only the current primary.
It's sick.
It's gross. But also the fall, general election. And what frustrates me as a mom, as a Texan, as somebody who has my children in public school, my 3 kids are in public school, but the public schools have done a really good job for my children, except for my special needs son, maybe not so much, but my daughter is going to Cornell, so I'm very happy. She's done a really good job for her. The question I have is this: is it time that we start thinking a little bit outside the box on how better to use the permanent school fund and the opportunities we have with expanding it into solar and wind and getting more money from those industries to expand the permanent school fund so we can better fund public education?
It's certainly one place we can get money. I don't think we're short on money, though. I think we're short on political willpower. And if we want to dedicate it from the permanent school fund, and the management of that is a complex financial operation, that there is money there. If that would be the solution, if that would get all the Republicans to finally fund public schools, great. But I think sort of like when they're talking about the border, when they're talking about public education and vouchers and things like that, I don't know how sincere they are about this crap. I think they just know that it's a good primary issue. And if they go ahead and fully fund public schools, then the schools will do really well, and we won't be able to sell our voucher plan, and then we won't win our primaries with our I think it's more political bullshit than it is lack of money, to be honest. And yes, that $6 million contribution is obscene. I remember everybody being outraged over a $1 million contribution. I mean, what are we going to say now? 6? What's the next one? 20?
Yeah.
I think we're going to need some limits here, because Greg Abbott is using those to fund primary campaigns against the Republicans who opposed vouchers.
Yeah. And meanwhile, they're complaining about George Soros giving like $1 million to Texans, to Democrats in Texas. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much, Nathan. Tell us, where can we find you and how best can we support you right now?
My website is nathanfortexas.com. That's FOR, not the number 4. That's the same handle on social media, at Nathan for Texas, on all the different thingies. Instagram, I can't say X, I'm going to say Twitter, Facebook, other social media platforms. If you want to volunteer, we would love to have you out here knocking on doors with us, poll reading. You can be a social media warrior. Just go on there and talk about things that are important to voters and the things that I work on. You can go to the website, nathanfortexas.com, and sign up there. You can email the campaign through there if you've got ideas, if you've got complaints, if you're curious about things. We will try to respond to you in the heat of these next 2 weeks of the primary. But I also just want to thank everybody on the call for being an engaged citizen in this process. And if we do this, like I said, I think we're closer than anybody thinks we are. I will leave you with this. Change happens slowly and then suddenly. Keep plugging.
Absolutely, 100%. So thank you. I look forward to meeting you on the campaign trail. Thank you so
Nancy.
much. Thank you.
Really honored to be here.